Welcome to this episode of Dadnormous. It's Jonscott. I'm here today with Ray Alba. So excited to talk to you, buddy. Really happy to speak to you today. And I'd like to invite those of you who are new to subscribe and to check out the other videos we've posted previously here on Dadnormous. So as we jump in, I've known Ray since 2012. It's easy to remember, since Hurricane Sandy here in the New York metro area. And I've gotten to know his wife and kids. I want to give you a chance, Ray, to introduce yourself and speak a little bit about your story and your life up to now.
Sure. Hey everyone, I'm Ray Alba. Actually, some of you may know me from the Alba Adventures. It was a little project my wife and I started.
I'll link it. I'll put a link up as well for it.
Fantastic. Yeah, it was, I guess, about 11 or 12 years ago. And it was really, probably 13 years ago. It's right after our first son passed away, which we'll get into in a minute. Basically the premise was to kind of record all our adventures together because I felt that any video I had of my oldest son, I really treasured that. We just started recording our kids and our times together. We shared meeting with family, that someone said, hey, that's pretty good. And eventually we got better and better. We're still not so great, but Jonscott, you as you know, you've been a big proponent of us getting better and reviewing our film shorts, and now we were screening at festivals. But for those that don't know us as Alba Adventures, I'm just a regular guy from New York City, born and raised here in Manhattan. I still live here in New York. I guess I'd say a father of 3 kids, which 2 are still here with us. I have a teenage son who's 16, who sometimes acts 14, and an 11-year-old daughter named Nevada, who probably acts more mature than I want her to. But proud dad, and really love having them in my life. I couldn't see my life without being a dad at this point, and so it's a great thing. And our oldest son, Rocky, actually ironically, would be 23 next week. He was born on July 9th, 1997, and because of challenges he had with seizures and other disabilities, his life was shortened. But we made sure that as parents, that he would have everything he could possibly have, all the love unconditionally. And that's something I learned about, being a dad, is like you provide unconditional love to your kids. And then one of the things that we always felt it was important was not material things, but experiences, that he could have the same experiences that a normal kid would have. So making sure he had friends to play with, or put him on the swing, make him catch a wave, get him skiing. People thought we were crazy. They said, well, why are you bringing him to Russia? I'm like, well, why not? So that was our kind of philosophy and belief. And
it's a great approach to being a dad and to life overall. And for those of you, again, who aren't familiar with Alba Adventures, I'll put a link down below, and if I can figure it out, I'll put a video somewhere. We'll see. I'm certainly not as experienced as an editor as you guys are with festivals nowadays. It's incredible to see. So I celebrate your success, and also knowing you guys well. I empathize as much as I'm capable of doing with the journey you've had as a dad. And I guess what I'd like to do, and typically how I'll start, we'll ask you to go back to 1996 when you first found out you were expecting, and if you can take me to where you were in your life at that point, just in a literal sense, where you were in the world, living, circumstance, all that.
Sure. So it's kind of a funny story. I have to go back a little bit further than that day. So it has to go back to when actually I met Alicia back in 1990. And we were both in college, and I was actually dating anyone, let alone marriage, was the furthest thing from my mind. And I meet this beautiful girl in Washington Square Park on a hot March day, and I just looked at her and she looked at me. We kind of went back and forth with this comedian. The comedian leaves. It's just the 2 of us. I said, how about lunch? I'll buy. And not knowing her name, she goes, yeah, sure. And I said, my God, this is a girl I'm going to marry. And sure enough, we started dating right away. We moved in together. And, it's now 30 years. We're still crazy about each other. At least I feel still crazy about her. And so we moved in together, and so years went by. We finally got married. We had eloped, actually, it's now been 27 years married this year in August. We had this idea of the value of being young parents. Particularly, like we knew. I mean, granted, every relationship has their issues. You know, there's always finances or things you have to consider. But in terms of our love for each other, that didn't change, right? And so we wanted to be young parents, and you know, it wasn't that we tried to get pregnant. Just one day we woke up. Alicia goes, "I think I'm late." I'm like, "Yeah, you might be. You never know." And so we're home in our apartment Upper West Side of 92nd Street, where we lived for about 20 years. Well, not then. We were only for 3 or 4 years. And then she goes, "Oh my God, I'm pregnant." I'm like, "We can't tell anybody." So it was actually then Labor Day weekend. We're actually up in Maine. My brother and his then wife, who's now his ex-wife, we're still good friends with, and we're like, we got to tell my twin brother. So we're at this like cafe in Maine, and I'm like, we have some news to tell you. And they were the first people that we told, you know, outside of Alicia and I. So so fast forward some time later, in July, we finally had our son. But it was really exciting, the whole kind of pregnancy, you know, because you know they always say like, oh, it's the wife or the female that gets pregnant, but really the men get pregnant too in some ways, because everything about you changes, you know, in terms of, you know, nesting and habits and what you eat and, you know, caring for your wife. And, you know, at least in my case it did. And I wouldn't say I equally put pound for pound weight on, but
Yeah, I could. That's a hilarious observation. I think if you can take back where you emotionally how you felt at that moment before you tripped the switches for, you know, your health and caring and, you know, kind of pivot in your mindset. What was your initial like emotional reaction at that moment?
oh man, I was stoked. I mean, it's a very special thing to be a dad, and it's kind of where I was probably one of the few guys that fantasized about being a dad and having a big family. We have 4 or 5 kids. There's a joke about. We had 3. That's good. And it was very emotional, very excited. You know, but we felt we needed to kind of keep it secret because we're young, right? Because, you know, Alicia was only 24, going to be 25, and I was, you know, basically 20. I was 27, going to be 28. And so, it was a smile on my face, ear to ear, you know, and I also didn't want to go fast. I wanted to kind of be like, to take for as long as it could take, you know, because I wanted to kind of savor every moment of the pregnancy.
That's amazing. So when you think back now, 2020 Ray, and you think back as to all the lessons that life as a dad have offered to you, is there anything that jumps out as you look back in retrospect over the last 23 years that you can really say, you know, I'm really present with this lesson that I've learned, so that if I can go back and speak to 1996 Ray, I'd give him this piece of advice as a dad?
Well, I say, you know, there's always, you know, the many things that, you know, lessons that I learned. You know, one is to be more patient, even though I felt I was fairly patient. I mean, like this, you know, having even more patience could be very valuable as a younger Ray. I think also, you know, I guess I had started my business then, so, you know, being a bit more kind of understanding finances a bit better, like, you know, not to say I wasn't saving money, but just save more, because, you know, it's like, it's funny how fast things did happen or do happen, like, you know, saving up for, you know, for college or other things. It just happens all the time. So I think those are probably two things. I mean, if I had to pick one of the two, I'd say patience for sure. You know, if I could have spent more time, I spent a lot of time. I spent a lot of time with our kids to begin with, like being able to be there when they're younger, because, you know, it goes so fast. But I think those are the 3 things. So, but in order: patience, time, and then last would be just kind of a bit better with saving for the kids.
Okay, good points. Thank you for.
I don't know if it's not that exciting, but, you know.
No, it's, listen, I think part of the mission is just reality. We're
Yeah,
sharing
yeah.
the reality. And I think, obviously you touched on Rocky, and I want to honor his time with you uh, in person, and obviously carry him forward always. And when you experienced that, and you had how old were Sandro and Nevada? Um, how old was Rocky when Sandro and Nevada were born?
So Nevada came after. So we were. It's like after Rocky was born. So shortly thereafter, we learned it was disabilities and they were undiagnosed. Um, a lot of things kind of our minds had to reshift in terms of, what our priorities are in terms of, his needs and his health. And, there was a lot of concern that, that we couldn't have other children. But, we found out genetically that, this was probably some anomaly. And then, we came to an understanding of, where we were with our son and his conditions, that he may not be here for long. But that didn't stop us from trying. It's for whatever reason, we just could never we just kind of gave up. We thought we would never have another child. And 5 years later, 7 years later, we got pregnant with Sandro. We always joke it was divine intervention, but they look enough alike that we know it was in divine intervention. But there was a 7-year difference in age almost between Alessandro and Rocky. And then after Rocky had passed, so that was 2007, April 19th, it was just shy of Alessandro's third birthday. So he really has these kind of fleeting thoughts and memories of Rocky, which is it's interesting because when we have conversations with him now as a teenager, it's moments that we've experienced together, but how he explains it is much different. It's more kind of dream state.
Okay.
And then, so then, 2 years have passed before we got lucky with Nevada. That was a complete surprise. And I'm not a religious person, but, spiritual, yeah. And Nevada, it has this uncanny way with things in terms of recalling things that she never experienced, that only someone present when Rocky was here would know. And at times it's almost freaky. Like it's freaked us out, And this one thing I'll mention real quick is that when our oldest, not to make it sad, when our oldest is passing, a friend of ours gave Rocky a penguin. And that penguin is like my daughter's favorite toy. I mean, like stuffed animal. And she's a fanatic about penguins. You go to her bedroom, she's got penguin drawings everywhere. She's got penguin stuffies. And I mean, ever since she was a born little baby, it was just insane. So I feel that there's maybe some memory, innate, who knows, that's in her. But yeah. So that's, so between Sandro and Nevada, it's about 5 years.
Okay. So as you first learned about Rocky, and then we're giving him this incredible life while he was with you in person here, and Sandro comes along, and you're experiencing life as a family, as a dad. And this is it's a hard question for me to even get out because I know you so well. As a dad, when he passes and you have this 3-year-old now, and then a new baby, like how, I'm trying to find an eloquent way of saying, like, how did you move forward? Like, how did you kind of summon the strength and the will to carry forward? I mean, it's fathomable loss that you've experienced. And I know it's, and we say this, we do speak often, and, it's an unfathomable loss. So I'm wondering at that moment, how it perhaps informed or helped you as a dad. Just curious as to your experiences at that point.
Sure. I mean, it's always, loss is always hard, irrespective if it's, an adult parent or, wife or relative. With children, I think it's particularly hard. I think that, I was fortunate in that I had a very kind of strong support network. I had, loving wife, Alicia, um, and we knew that we had to be there for each other. And I think that, talking things through in terms of like, kind of understanding where we are emotionally in terms of, of losing our son, right, and what that meant. And I remember it was kind of the day that our son was dying, we made sure he was home and he was comfortable. And the moments before he passed, I remember, just yelling, "Run, Rocky, run!" Right. And in my kind of mind's eye, as he was crossing over, I saw this kid running, right. And so I think that maybe you want to call it fantastical, or it was a way for me to kind of accept him crossing over and not being here with us physically, right? And I think that, well, I know that basically what at least what I did was, I just basically made sure that any memory I had of Rocky would still be carried forward. Like, so there's a saying that, sometimes a person dies twice. They die, if they pass away, and then their memory passes away.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt that it was extremely important that whoever I meet, and people always see us and see our kids like, oh, it's great. How many kids do you have? And it's a hard question to answer sometimes, but I say I have 3 kids, and my oldest is, somewhere else you want to call it heaven. He's in this other world, right? Or he's in the spirit world. And I think that when parents or other people hear that first, they get very shocked by it. It's like, oh, I'm really sorry. And that's the last thing I want people to feel sorry. You shouldn't. I think it's I don't want people to feel sorry, and they shouldn't feel sorry about it, because death is part of life, right? So I think what we learned through our son's passing was the value of life and the value of time, and like to be focused less on material and more about our relationships to each other, because that's all you have really. At the end of the day, it's like you don't take some material thing to the grave, and you don't remember that material thing so much. You remember like the act of maybe getting it, right? The time you spent with that person. So I think that's what we really kind of carried us forward, was the fact that we had all these great memories, and that we are always talking about our son as if he was still here with us, even though we know he's not.
Right. Well, again, I think that's part of the commitment you have as a dad to your 3 kids.
Correct.
That's the manifestation of it on a day-by-day basis, which is a beautiful thing. And I've been lucky enough to experience it with you all as well. And when you think about the lessons that you want your son Sandro and your daughter Nevada to learn by this presence and learn by the experiences, what are some of the lessons you want them, if they're watching this, in a couple of years, what do you want them to know that's kind of alive for you today about the lessons you want them to take?
Sure. So I hope that, what they take out of at least, me being their dad, and the lessons of, having an older sibling that's not with them here, and hopefully the philosophy and values that Alicia and I bring to them is that there's more to life than material, to love each other unconditionally, to be stewards for humanity, to really just embrace, time, and not to basically take it for granted, because you may not be here at that next moment, right? So if there's an opportunity that you feel is just and right, take the opportunity, right? Or at least convey that you're interested in this opportunity. And I think most of all, it's just to really love to love each other, because, at the end of the day, your brother and sister, your mom and son, and dad and son, dad and daughter, is, that's family is really important. Sometimes family can be tough, but at the end of the day, it's like what really keeps us together is that kind of love that's there for each other.
That's great.
Yeah.
So if you think back over the course of being a dad, and you think about a mistake you made or something that's present for you that you could have done differently, give me an example. I'm sure there's one.
Yeah, I have dozens of them. I think that it may be partly it's more of a personal thing. Like even though I grew up in New York City and I love being here, it's got a ton of diversity. I almost felt like I would have liked to have given them something different to kind of grow up in the country and like to have more access to nature. Don't get me wrong, we're in nature all the time, but to be the reverse. Like we would be like in like nature, and then we would come to the city when we needed to get our diversity fix or our cultural needs kind of fulfilled. Not to say that we're devoid of culture in other areas, but I just kind of feel like that's something I think I really wish I could have done a bit different time early, but it's still young. I mean, it still happen. I also kind of, I mean, what I wish, since I wish I was able to have more kids, maybe a couple more, but my wife would probably kill me. Even though we talk about 4 or 5 kids, it would have been nice. And maybe, and just like thinking about starting a bit earlier, like maybe starting at 23 versus 25. But it's hard these days because, you have school and you have bills and you have to start your life, and everything about society is so much different than even when we were kids, 20 some odd years ago.
It's true, and I'll ask you to project a little. So if you can imagine, it's 2030, and Sandro's 26, Nevada's 21. You're in your early 60s.
Early 60s.
and they're going to see this clip, and you're talking to them now about how you feel as their dad today. What would you say to them if you were speaking to camera and they were going to see this in 2030?
Wow. Okay. So I guess that's a good question and a difficult one to answer. There's so much to say. So to Sandro particularly, it's like that. I'm just proud of him. I think sometimes my son feels like I don't love him enough because that father-son relationship is different than a father-daughter relationship. But to know that I love him unconditionally. That I will always be there to provide for him even when he's 26. So he always has a room in our home and a meal and a warm bed and my love and support unconditionally forever and always. It's my dad commitment, my duty to him. And also I hope that by the time he's 26 that he would have been dating and traveling. I've become his own person, and I think that's one of the things he's at that age now that he's starting to kind of come of age and hopefully I can kind of give him some advice during that time. But right now COVID times it's been more like just stay up the device, make some phone calls to your friends. But so I think for Sandro, hey, I love you unconditionally, even when you're 52, but you're not that age yet. And for Nevada, I guess it's very much the same thing. Don't grow up so fast. I will love to kind of bottle you up at 11 forever because it's a kind of a cool age. I get to see a little bit of the kind of teenage side of you coming out, but still the little kid side of you. You still like the piggyback rides, and even when you're 21 in 10 years, that I'll still be there to give you that piggyback ride. And again, love and support you. And you always have a place at home in my heart.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. So any other final thoughts that you're thinking about at this point? What's present for you as a dad today? We're recording this in the end of June 2020, and COVID-19 has been sadly sweeping the world. And in New York City, where Reyes, you've done an extraordinary job of quarantining, where the kids didn't leave the house for, was it 100 days or so?
Oh, it was crazy. Yeah, 120 days. I think. I think part of it was their fear too about going outside, but I think that in terms of what I hope for and what we hope to change is at least the ability to understand really what this the COVID times are going to look like, so that our kids can start seeing their friends and start socializing. And it's starting to happen. We're starting to see that with our daughter. Our son's starting to reach out to some of his friends, and we're just trying to figure out ways that they can actually, have their lives back. As an adult, it's it's like I'm taught I already know how to cope with a lot of difficulties. As young kids, they're still adapting, and this is all very new to everybody. But to them, it's a real shocker because they haven't had much life experience yet. And for our son, who's just now starting to kind of go out, and we're like kind of letting the leash loose, like be home by midnight, see your friends, you want to stay home the weekend while we go away, giving him a sense of having his own personal responsibility. I just hope to kind of give that back to him, but in a safe way for him and for us, right? So that's really what's kind of been on our mind lately. Is to kind of give them that opportunity to socialize and be with friends, and figure out how they can hug, not share a meal or drink, but but yeah, that's what's really been kind of on our kind of minds and the forefront of all our thoughts and planning lately. So.
Great. Well, listen, my friend, I really appreciate the time very much. For those of you that are new, please subscribe. I'll also link Ray's channel here and another video of his, perhaps. I have to pick one of my favorites. There are very many. I look forward to seeing you all next episode. Please feel free to leave your comments down below. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, buddy.